we asked a question: what would be the greatest challenge to the US national security space enterprise in the next 5 years? And we offered a number of suggestions that could be ranked. It included cyber attacks, domestic politics, bolstering resilience, integrating commercial resilience, jamming. We also had an option for other, which got quite a number of responses. And among the things that came in were things like data analytics, integrating with allies, equipping the Space Force with offensive capabilities, and IP theft. I'm curious from everyone, and maybe McKenna, will start with you on this, how you would respond to the question of what the greatest challenge to the US national security space enterprise in the next 5 years is. And if you're surprised at all that cyber attacks easily lap the field compared to the other choices that were there.
Yeah, I think this is a great question, and all of the responses are pretty valid. I think it's clear that there are a lot of threats that can harm our space assets. My answer is kind of a cop-out, but I think it's bolstering resilience, which to me encompasses a lot of these other answers. Especially in space, resiliency is very difficult. Technology and these threats are evolving so rapidly, and a lot of our big space military systems they take a long time to produce.
I know when people talk about threats to national security space, they are looking largely at deliberate responses, whether they're weapons or, behaviors that are deliberately threatening. But I think that anything that disrupts the domain as much as megaconstellations already are a huge concern for national security space enterprise. Right now, there's roughly, 4,800 active satellites. If you look at the amount of satellites that are intended to be launched over the next few years, you could have, it used to be 120,000 more. And just last week, there was essentially a land grab where companies were requesting the FCC an additional nearly 40,000 more satellites. Obviously, those aren't all going to come to fruition, but a good chunk of them are. And as we've seen with SpaceX Starlink, a lot of, that's a good chunk of how many satellites are active now. And so that's just a huge change to how the domain functions. Space is going to be the primary actor is a commercial entity. It's not a nation state. That's entirely different than how it was during the whole space age. Our governance structure is set up to deal with this. And we haven't really figured out, how to deal with these changes. Is it okay to essentially give an orbit to one company, which is what's going to happen if you have tens of thousands of satellites in an orbit? Have we figured out carrying capacities of orbits? It used to be, okay, as long as you have end of life plans, FCC generally would give you your spectrum allocation, but, is that still an issue? Do you have to worry about, satellites coming up and replacing other satellites and going through different orbital domains? And then the last, looking at it from a geopolitical perspective, China's got plans for, I think, one constellation of maybe 13,000, but by and large, these mega constellations are of the West for the West. And so how does that proceed? Is it going to proceed as essentially taking over a part of space, which is, against the Outer Space Treaty? I don't think we've really come to grapple with how much it's changing everything. We're kind of, chugging along in the same policies and processes and regulations that have worked so far. We got to change them. And I think that absolutely will be a huge factor in how secure the domain is. And so I think the national security space enterprise should absolutely be aware and worried about this issue.
I think there is a lack of focus on the issue of not just mega constellations, but on the future role of commercial space and how we as an international community regulate commercial space so that it fits with international security and national security priorities and needs. There is danger in allowing unregulated commercial activities in space, particularly new activities such as resource extraction, things like that, but also simply building infrastructure in space. That unwittingly commercial activities will draw nation states into conflict that the nation states don't really want, and that's a potential problem on the horizon that I think there hasn't been enough thought process given to by the national security actors, not just in the United States, but globally.